Friday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Several more hours. Browns will be on the clock in round 2 of the draft. Now, do they trade up? Do they trade down? Well, we'll discuss that. Jordan Schultz on the herd with some of the sleepers that he likes in this upcoming draft.
Braylon Allen, running back out of Wisconsin. Now, he's working out with Derrick Henry in Dallas. He's an absolute horse. 20 years old, youngest player in the draft. He's got something to him. 5.4 yards per carry each of the last 2 years. Jalen Polk. I had a personnel executive tell me this is Puka Nacua of this year's draft.
Yep, he's really – now, he got overshadowed by Rome Odunze.
Of course.
And he was a 2 to a 3 in that draft, but he is – I've seen him live. Clever, yards after the catch guy.
Physical, great hands, yak, had 9 touchdowns, 1,100 yards. He is a really good player. I don't think he's getting out of the second round. Eric All Jr., Iowa tight end, transfer from Michigan. Not great stats. 6'4", 250, similar build as George Kittle. We know about Iowa tight ends. Kittle, Laporta, Dallas Clark, Noah Fant. List goes on and on.
They all block.
They all block, and they all catch.
With that, let's welcome in Jared Mueller from Dawgs by Nature. Jared, we'll dive into the receivers. There are still a lot of what the Browns do is going to be really interesting. And nobody has any idea at this point.
Nobody has any idea. It's the fun part of this year's draft is that after the first, 5 to 10, you really are looking at kind of flavor of ice cream do you like kind of thing, all the way maybe through somewhere in the 60th pick. Now, there might be some players a little higher on certain boards and those kind of things, but this is where the draft gets really interesting this year because some years you're 20, 25 players, and then there's a big drop-off. This year there was kind of a drop-off really early, and then it's kind of third round is kind of where there's kind of that next kind of shelf. So a lot of really interesting prospects. I will say I appreciate what Jordan shared there. I'm always cautious of trying to find the next anyone because then you start to kind of find and see the things you want to see to find the next Puka Nacua, or even to look at the side of the helmet to decide how good a tight end is. It's so easy to do, and there are some reasons to do it when it comes to understanding how they're trained, and Alabama oftentimes really kind of gets everything out of their players, so they don't have much more of a ceiling, those kind of things, but I'm a little cautious on some of the other stuff.
Yeah, and again, it's the Browns could trade up, they could trade down, they could make their pick at 54. I don't think they probably know. There's probably 2 or 3 guys that if they slide a little, they may try to trade up and get, and if 3 or 4 others aren't there, they may trade back.
Yeah, Barry is not someone who gets kind of stuck on anything. He's really looking at the right fit, the right value, and even the idea that, the 6th receiver isn't as valuable as the 3rd or 4th defensive tackle, defensive end, those kind of things. So even if it's more talented, value starts to play a role as well for the team 2024, 2025, 2026.
All right, so supply and demand on the wide receivers. I think I think you were a little surprised 7 went. I really wasn't. We'll get into that. Let's take a look at some of the best available wide receivers that are still there. So you got Franklin from Oregon, Mitchell from Texas, Keon Coleman, Roman Wilson, Ladd McConkey, Jalen Polk, Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. There's some really good. 2 or 3 of those wide receivers are going to be really productive NFL players. I'm not sure which 2 at this point.
Well, and that's really why it surprised me at the supply and demand. Now, we're not talking at the top of the draft. Marvin Harrison is an amazing player. Marvin Harrison Jr., amazing player. Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors, like some of those guys kind of set themselves apart. But really, in a lot of ways, this draft, after some of those top receivers, is 10 to 15 wide receivers that you could really shuffle up. And the reason that surprised me is normally when you have kind of this glut of talent at a certain position, normally that kind of pushes that down, and cornerback where there aren't as many, or some of those kind of positions, defensive end, defensive tackle, some of the positions that maybe there aren't as many talented players kind of get pushed up. But we didn't see that this year. We saw wide receiver and offensive tackle, which are, and a little bit quarterback, the three positions that were seen as kind of the strength also basically were 2/3 of the first round. And so normally, especially something like wide receiver where you need three of them, you don't really know which one's going to hit. Normally that leads to some kind of falling a little bit. But the reality is that list that you just showed tells us there are still a lot of talented players at that position.
Of the ones that are left, who do you like? Who do you think fits with the Browns? Who do you think would be a skill set that the Browns maybe would like to add to that wide receiving core, wide receiver room, if you will?
That's a good question. I think there's really two, and they're totally different. Troy Franklin is a receiver who I love. That is a player that, along with Johnny Newton, the defensive tackle out of Illinois, that I would be more than happy to see the Browns move up for today. He's someone who could develop into that number one wide receiver. He can develop behind Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore. This year, if Amari moves on, because wide receiver contracts are going through the roof, Franklin can move into number two behind Jeudy, and there can just kind of be that development. The other one is Malachi Corley. He was called the Yat King in college. There's a lot of conversation about him being kind of a Deebo Samuel-like. And we've seen that Kevin Stefanski has tried to find that style of receiver for a few years now. And so I think Corley, totally different. He's not going to develop into that number one, number two outside receiver, but he's someone who can play kind of a gadget role and really provide the Browns some unique opportunities given how he is with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, that's a guy that, you get the ball in his hands, he gets easy yards. And that's what you're looking for. Break a tackle, and it could be a 30-yard gain, it could be a 60-yard gain. If you only get 6 or 7, now it's 2nd down and 3 if you do it on 1st down.
Yeah, it works out. And again, it's really about spacing, timing, some of those kind of things. And I think with more, 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end on the field, you might be able to see a little bit more of that spacing, and where, you have players being run off, defenders being run off, and all of a sudden, and Browns fans have seen this, you have a wide receiver coming out late across the middle, but then can break 1 tackle, and he's 20, 30 yards down the field. So there's a lot of excitement with Corley, but it has to be the right fit and value and those kind of things. Whereas Franklin, I think the only real knock on him is just his weight. And as we all have, we get a little bit older, it's easy to put on weight at times.
Yeah.
Not worried about that as much.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, Falcons took Michael Penix in the 1st round, and I have no idea why. Why? You're manufacturing drama, and you should be trying to avoid it.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is it's bad asset management. Like, it just is. You just signed Kirk Cousins. And I put it in a tweet at one point today, the reality is as a Browns fan, being desperate for good quarterback play, I do sort of get it. So if Michael Penix has a top 5 style of quarterback grade, not for this draft, but just in general, some of that, how they do their grading system, if he's a top 5 kind of player, you can get him there at 8. He can sit behind Kirk Cousins, who you paid for at least 2 years, a little bit of the 3rd year is guaranteed. You are trying to guarantee that at the most important position, you've got a quarterback. You think Kirk is good enough that you're not going to be drafting this high anymore. Next year's draft class is pretty bad, or assumed to be pretty bad in 2025. I get it overall. You need a quarterback, and you want to try to guarantee you have one for the next 10 years, and Kirk Cousins isn't it, coming off his Achilles, age, all of that. So you put Penix in the best situation to develop. I think it's terrible asset management. But overall, I think in 5 to 7 or 8 years, if Michael Penix is good, no one will really question what they did. If Michael Penix isn't good in 5 to 10 years, it doesn't really matter. All those people will be gone.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, you just spent, $160 million on a quarterback. So you think you're a playoff team now. What have you done to help yourself in that realm? You could have taken a defensive end. You could have taken a guy that's going to make an impact. You don't get the opportunity to do that very often.
Yeah, you don't. You're absolutely right. And that's the asset management kind of thing that I think they really did fail at. I think they are looking big picture. There are some people who that their GM is trying to kind of guarantee his job for a couple extra years. That doesn't work like that in the NFL, but you're exactly right. I don't think I think they know they're a playoff caliber team, not a Super Bowl caliber team. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing here is even with Kirk Cousins, they might know they have a little bit of a ceiling. And so maybe we try to hedge our bets a little bit, which isn't good in the top 10 of the NFL draft.
Yeah, I get it. The other thing is, Kirk Cousins wasn't happy about it. That's going to be bad relative to agents in that organization. And do not assume that those people don't talk. They talk all the time. And right now, that's not a place you want to get involved in.
It's not, and it's actually something that I've been told by multiple agents all the time at the Combine. They love dealing with Andrew Berry, and it's not because he pays the most and some of the snarky things I know some of the listeners and watchers can kind of think about, but they know what to expect from him. They know that he'll take care of their players. They know he'll be really honest with their players. If he's thinking about cutting them, they'll let him know, right? They will literally tell Nick Chubb's agent at the end of the season, this is kind of how this is going to play out on our part. That's your choice when we come to negotiate later, what you do. But agents love that they know. It's called predictability. They know what to expect. They don't think they're getting played or their games being played. And that's something that the Falcons are going to have to worry about.
All right. Mary Kay Cabot wrote an article about this, and she's been saying this to anybody that will listen. Browns have no plans to trade Greg Newsome this weekend during the NFL draft and will instead be picking up his fifth-year option soon worth fully guaranteed $13.37 million for 2025. I'm not surprised at that. Andrew Berry's told you how much he values guys that can play, and he went even more specific. Cornerbacks who can play press man coverage, and they feel they have three of them. And if you're going to play Jim Schwartz style of defense, you're going to need every one of them.
You really are. It's just a really interesting place for the Browns to be because Newsome was drafted 1 year ahead of Martin Emerson, but they will be free agents at the same time if no extension is agreed to. And so then you are looking at, are you paying, and listen, whatever anybody thinks of Greg Newsome, right now he would get 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 million dollars a year if he was a free agent. That is what would happen. And so are you going to be able to pay Greg Newsome, Denzel Ward, and Martin Emerson? If not, what does that look like, right? And so I think they're doing exactly what you were talking about with the Falcons, which is they are in it right now. They are a Super Bowl caliber team. We're not just going to trade somebody away for a third-round pick plus a little bit of something else. That's what I've been told the return would be, just because in a year or two we might have some difficult financial decisions. We need them right now. We're going to pay him right now. We'll pay him next year, and we'll figure the rest out as we go.
All right, before we go to break, I know you've kind of written an article referencing this as well. Last 5 years, 37.2% of drafted rookies logged 300 snaps plus in the season. That's about 17 a game. Bottom line is, even if you're a really good rookie, it's really hard to get on the field.
It really is, and I think that's hard for fans, partially because we're really biased. Confirmation bias tells us that first-round picks, second-round picks, draft picks, they should be on the field. And then when we see other teams, we see some of those rare players, the Puka Nakuas of the world, obviously C.J. Stroud. When we see those, everybody's draft picks are successful. Everybody's draft picks play right away. When the reality is that generally a good draft is if you have one or two starters and one or two other contributors on your team for 4 years. That is considered a pretty good draft at the NFL level. In the first year, you're just hoping you get some production, they stay healthy, and they kind of figure things out from a system perspective.
Jared Mueller from Dawgs by Nature and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Plus, we'll take a look at Jared's mock draft after the first round. So current mock draft coming up. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million Ultimate Cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
We continue talking Browns with Jared Mueller from Dawgs by Nature. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hello, gentlemen. Long-time caller, Go Dog Pound, Keith, formerly of Columbus, now currently of Cleveland. If the Cleveland Browns wore a different jersey and had a different helmet on going into this year, they at minimum would be considered one of the favorites in the AFC. But because of the recent, which I don't consider recent, we're a playoff team, history of not being good, they hold it against us. It's as simple as that. But again, I think we'll continue to prove wrong. Once again, Go Dog Pound, your thoughts.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Jared, that's probably fair. The one thing is, until you win a playoff, I know they won the Pittsburgh. Until you make the playoffs back-to-back years, you start winning playoff games, there's going to be that biased against you.
There is, and obviously everything with Deshaun Watson, both on the field and off the field, understanding whether you're going to be able to trust him, right? And whether it's his body, obviously the off-the-field stuff that led him to be available for Cleveland to trade for him when all the other teams wanted him as well. The reality in the NFL is you have to prove it. You have to be consistent. I think when the schedule comes out, we're still going to see a little bit of that. The Browns haven't proved it yet. We're not going to give it to them yet. I think we see it with referees. Now, not to the same conspiracy theory, but the reality is this hasn't been a consistent team, right? And so when the Browns are consistent, when they do things consistently, refs, the league, the media start to see them in a very consistent way. Until that happens, you're still going to get kind of the same coverage that they might not be the same old Browns, but they're not a championship level contender. They're somewhere in between.
You wrote an article, veterans with guaranteed salaries could impact the Browns draft picks. Take it through that and just kind of your thoughts in that article.
The reality is the Browns have brought back a lot of players this year, and so when the Browns guarantee salary at a root level, it basically tells you that those players are going to be on the team. And so where that really plays a big role is defensive tackle this year. The Browns have a number of guys that they have guaranteed salary to. Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst, Quentin Jefferson, all of those guys. And then you have the one that they haven't guaranteed salary, just the way rookie contracts work, is Siaki Ika, but he was your third-round pick last year. So all of a sudden you have these 5 guys that are already guaranteed money or were your third-round pick last year. So the odds of adding a 6th defensive tackle, when you have all this guaranteed money, which is going to count against the salary cap, which you've already paid out, is bad business practice, especially because most or all of that, I think it's actually all of that has been guaranteed or the draft pick made in the last 12 months. So these are not players that still have some money on their contract from a couple years ago and are trying to phase them out. These are guys that Andrew Berry and the front office have decided in the last 2 years deserve guaranteed money, or in Ika's case, deserve to be a third-round pick. Adding a 6th defensive tackle, that's tough to carry. Just from a roster construction perspective, and cutting someone with a guaranteed contract that you thought was going to be productive this year, unless there's some other issue, just doesn't seem to make sense. So you might see that defensive tackle isn't as important, even though that's maybe where I would want to go today on round 2.
All right. Along those lines, we're going to take a look. You wrote an article with the best available. We're going to run through a couple position groups, then we'll get to your mock draft. All right. Best players available heading into round 2. These are defensive tackles. Johnny Newton from Illinois, Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State, Chris Jenkins, Michigan, Ruki Ohorohoro from Clemson, and Braden Fisk from Florida State. Which of those do you think fit the best? Who are you most intrigued by with the tackles?
Yeah, Johnny Newton is a top 10 to 15 talent. There's some concerns about some health issues. I haven't been able to kind of narrow in on what those are. But we saw that with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, some kind of heart issue that allowed him to drop to the Browns, and we've seen what he's been like. I think Michael Hall Jr. is being underrated in this draft. I'm not saying that as a Buckeye. I am a Buckeye, but I'm not saying it as a Buckeye. Michael Hall just has great hands, a lot of interior pressure in the passing game. He's undersized, so he's not going to be a huge piece of kind of a full package run game, those kind of things. But those 2 guys I really, really like. Braden Fisk, if he didn't only have 1 year at Florida State after transferring, and he wasn't 24 years old, I believe, I would have a lot more interest in, and I think the Browns would have a lot more interest in. at this point, his age and his limited production at the higher level is going to kind of have him dropping here.
All right, so let's look at some tackles. So these are offensive linemen, predominantly tackles, still on the board. You have the kid from BYU, Amagia from Yale, Fisher. Blake Fisher's intriguing. You saw Alt go in the first round. That's the reason he was playing right tackle instead of left tackle. And then Roger Rosengarten from Washington. Of those, who do you like? Who do you think might be on the Browns' radar?
You know, I think Huron out of Yale is their perfect third-round pick. I think he's a developmental player that they'd like to get in when they're looking here. If they had healthy tackles and they were looking to make some moves, I think Blake Fisher might make a little bit more sense, a little bit ready, more pro-ready right now. But I think if they're going offensive tackle, they are looking a little bit more long-term. And I think the kid out of BYU is just going to go a little bit higher after what happened yesterday with the offensive tackle. So I think really they're going to either have to go for the kid out of Yale, which there'll be a lot of jokes about an Ivy League school, or then the Washington Husky, Rosengarten, might be available there in that third round if they really feel like they have to get another guy, especially given all the injuries that they had last year.
All right, so running backs. No running back taken in the first round. There are some people that think there might not be one taken in the second. That one I don't know about, but here's who is available. Jalen Wright, Tennessee. Benson from Florida State. Brooks from Texas. Estime from Notre Dame. Braylon Allen from Wisconsin. Who do you think might be appealing to the Browns out of that list?
Yes. Yes is the answer there. I mean, the reality is all of them have a lot of really interesting traits. Allen is their young player. Wright is coming off an injury, or he would have been probably the first guy off the board. Trey Benson is a 3-round back who I think is really, really impressive. And then Estime is I think he's going to fall because he didn't test real well, but on the field. And then one of the things we talked about our last time together, just really explosive, breaks a lot of tackles, has faced a lot of 8-man boxes. So that I think the answer is yes to that. And there's probably 3 or 4 other guys on that that aren't on the list that could be of interest to the Browns. That is just a really deep group. Again, that's one where supply and demand is pushing these players down and could see them late second, early third round before we see the first one off the board.
All right, so you did a mock draft after the day 1 picks. We're going to take a look at second round, a day 2 mock draft, so the second and third round picks. So round 2, pick 54, Michael Hall, defensive tackle from Ohio State. Round 3, you have him taking the tackle that we were talking about, Amagaji from Yale. What do you like about those two guys? How do you think they fit?
I think they fit because they are talented players at important positions. When we talk about value, the Browns need impactful players, and these are two guys that can be impactful at really, really important positions. And when you're selecting in the second or third round, that's really, really important. You can fill needs in the 4th, 5th, and 7th round, those kind of things. But here, you're really looking for players who can do very specific things at premium positions and can develop. Hall can rush the passer. I know that Jim Schwartz would love to have a player like him, or Newton if they traded up a little bit, if he doesn't fall, that could really kind of just cause havoc in there, along with everybody else they have on the defensive line. And then I think Huron out of Yale, again, is just that young guy that I don't know if they made a decision on where DeJuan Jones, what's going to happen with Jack Conklin coming off of an injury, and then obviously Jedrick Wills. So I think they do want a young developmental guy. I don't think James Hudson III has come along like they would like. And so I think they're looking for kind of that next guy.
All right, before I let you go, gut feeling. Do you think they stay at 54? Do you think somebody slides a la JOK where they try to move up and grab them?
If it was between those two, I think they're going to stay at 54. I think they're more likely to trade back at this point in time.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think they probably would like to get a 4th-round pick, which they don't currently have.
Exactly. They need another pick kind of in between the 3rd and the 100, whatever that number is at this point. I can't remember. It was a long night. Yeah, I think they need that extra kind of 100, 98, 99, 105 kind of pick.
Jared Mueller, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jared.
Absolutely, Dave. Enjoy tonight.
All right, it's Jared Mueller. Make sure you check him out. Dogs by Nature, always really good draft coverage and draft insight. We're going to continue talking Browns, continue talking draft. Jacob Roach from Browns Wire and the Barking Browns podcast straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million ultimate cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns. Round 2 of the draft tonight, as is round 3. Browns will have a pick in round 2, a pick in round 3 as it stands right now. Greg Williams, former Browns defensive coordinator, pulls back the curtain a little bit on the number 1 pick overall in 2017 when the Browns took Myles Garrett. This from the Come Get Some podcast with Greg Williams and Blake Williams.
Up until, 2 hours before the draft, okay, we're still in arguments going on there in the draft room, okay, about whether it's Myles or Mitch Trubisky. And finally, I'm going to say 2.5 hours before, they're looking like they're going to settle on Mitch Trubisky. And so right at the 2-hour mark, I said, hey, fellas, I understand that. We've talked this whole thing through. I just want to let everybody in here know I'm going to have a press conference after this and let them know about the conversations going on here about not taking Myles Garrett. It's amazing how we decided all of a sudden to take Myles Garrett, okay, in that situation and how it's proved out to be since then.
With that, let's welcome in Jacob Roach from Browns Wire and the Barking Browns podcast. Jacob, I have no reason to doubt Greg Williams, but yikes is all I can say when I hear that.
Yeah, and like, this is a thing that had been rumored before. Like, we've heard this. It's not the first time. So that's why I agree with you. I tend to believe Greg Williams, because this is not the first time I've heard that as, Hugh Jackson standing on the table being like, we got to take Mitch Trubisky. Like, I've heard those rumors before, so I believe that they're true. I'm very, very thankful that the smart guys in the room made the smart decision instead. Without question.
All right, let's get to yesterday, round 1 of the draft. You wrote an article just around the North. So the Bengals took an offensive tackle from Georgia. Steelers took a guard from Washington. Ravens took cornerback Nate Wiggins. Take us through that article and just your thoughts on what the Browns' opponents did in round 1.
The Bengals did one of the things I really didn't want them to do. But I will say overall that our division rivals did what they always do, and that's draft well. I think the Bengals in the last 5 or 6 years have been really good at drafting. And, of course, Pittsburgh and Baltimore's track records in the draft, they're self-explanable. But with Amarius Mims, he's probably the biggest boom or bust prospect maybe in this entire draft. Only 8 career starts at Georgia, but my goodness, when Amarius Mims is on the field, do you know that he's on the field? He's massive player, massive athletic upside. It's just a raw player. You've got to develop him. If you can do that with Amarius Mims, I think that you are coming out with a guy that will protect Joe Burrow. They love their big, giant, hulking tackles in Cincinnati, and with Trent Brown and Orlando Brown Jr. there, Mims doesn't have to necessarily play right away if he's not ready, and that's not cool for the Browns. I don't love that with the Amarius Mims there, but I think that was a fantastic pick with Pittsburgh and Troy Fontenot. Another great pick because he can play inside, he can play outside. Offensive line was a major problem for them as they're trying to figure out quarterback. We've seen with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, they need above average offensive line. So they're like, hey, we've invested in this quarterback position with these 2 young guys. Well, I'm sorry, Fields a young guy, and then, Russell Wilson and a grizzled veteran. But hey, we're going to invest in the offensive line. The Browns have been doing that for years, and it's worked out for us in that sense with the quarterback. So I really like what those 2 teams did. And Wiggins, I think, is the best cover corner in this draft. He's just like 165 pounds is what he looks like on tape. I know they weighed him in at like 172, 175 at the combine, but that's a Baltimore Ravens pick. He's not going to be on the strong side against your big physical wide receivers. That's where Marlon Humphrey will be. But great drafting by the AFC North last night.
All right, day 2 draft fits for all 32 teams, PFF. For the Browns, they go Keon Coleman, wide receiver, Florida State. Amari Cooper, now 30, has a voidable contract after the season, bringing in the heir apparent top-end ball skills this year, a wise move. 52 receptions, Coleman had 11 touchdowns, 15 explosive plays, and forced 11 missed tackles after the catch. I'd be surprised if Coleman's around that late in the set. I think he goes probably pretty darn early tonight in the second round.
I have a strong inkling that he's picked 33. I think that Buffalo probably, which of course is how it would go for the Browns, right? Yep. But yeah, he's my white whale, man. Like if he's there, if Keon Coleman is in striking range, if he's at like 45, 44, I'd go up and get him. Like I would absolutely go up and get him because I think he mixes size, strength, and athleticism. He's got some issues at time creating separation, but his physicality and his strong hands and his ball skills really kind of negate that for me a little bit. So I'm not as concerned when it comes to that sort of thing. But yeah, if Keon Coleman's within striking range, it would be an absolute home run. I would celebrate all week long. But I believe Buffalo takes him.
All right, so this is bold predictions for day 2 of the draft, CBSSports.com. They have early wide receiver run. While there may have been a couple of surprising wide receivers selected into the first round, still a ton of talent on the board to be selected early and often on day 2. Receiver, arguably the deepest position in the draft, and we'll see that throughout Friday night. And they also go no running back in round 2. Bit of change of pace. Running back market in free agency this offseason, pretty robust. At least part of that had to do with the fact not considered a strong running back class. Jonathan Brooks coming off a torn ACL. I get the wide receiver run. I think there'll probably be at least one running back in round 2. I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I would think you may not see one until the back half of round 2, maybe around where the Browns are picking, for example. Not saying they'll go running back, but somewhere in that range. I have a tough time thinking like Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Jalen, like that none of those guys go. I know that Brooks is coming off of the ACL tear, so there's some speculation that he falls because of that. But I don't think that all of them fall out of the second round. The wide receiver run is very, very likely, and that could force the Browns to potentially take a running back at 54 for all we know, depending on how the offensive tackle class goes. The players go ahead of Cleveland, but I would be shocked. Like Jalen Wright's got a lot of momentum. I know Audric Estime tested really well from Notre Dame. Bucky Irving even. I would be shocked if a running back doesn't go. But could it only be like maybe 2? Yeah, probably. I wouldn't say more than 3 go in the second round, but I don't think it's 0.
All right, so this is from PFF. 4 best role players in the 2024 NFL Draft. They go Dylan Johnson, running back from Washington. Johnson possesses big-bodied, 3-down profile coveted by NFL coaches. Among 42 Power 5 running backs with at least 400 offensive snaps, Johnson's 88.3 PFF grade ranks 5th. Jalen McMillan, also from Washington, wide receiver, PFF grade 73.6. When he lined up in the slot, ranks 11th among 19 Power 5 slot receivers to earn at least 65 snaps. Jalen Wright, running back that we talked about from Tennessee, natural gifted gap scheme rusher, averaged .29 missed tackles forced per gap scheme rushing attempt in 2022, averaging more than 7 yards per rushing attempt as well both years. Luke McCaffrey, that is Christian McCaffrey's brother, from a wide receiver from Rice, gritty number 2. Wide receiver type player, willing to win in traffic and fight through contact. Sounds like his dad, Ed McCaffrey. 80.4 PFF offensive grade, 13th among 48 FBS wide receivers with at least 700 snaps. Do you think any of those fit in the Browns? What the Browns would be looking for? If so, who?
The one that stands out to me is Jalen Wright. Like, when you watch the Tennessee running back, there's a little bit of Nick Chubb in his game. I hate doing some of those comparisons because I think sometimes if you get expectations, like, oh, you're getting Nick Chubb. I'm like, no, but, like, does he play the game like Nick Chubb? Yeah, I think Jalen Wright's a really patient runner. I think he's explosive. Acceleration's really good. I think he can change direction well. Some of the things that I think you see Nick Chubb do where it's like, oh, hey, there's a cutback lane. Not many people are going to see or have the change of direction and explosiveness to exploit. But I think Jalen Wright can do that. And I think his straight line speed's as good as anybody in this class. And he didn't get a ton of run as like a pass catcher in that offense, so we're not 100% where he is, and maybe he's not the greatest blitz, running back, but I think he can be a very fine receiving option, just maybe not a ton of that at Tennessee. But if you're looking for a complementary piece to, like, once Nick Chubb is healthy, I think Wright could be his replacement and his complement while Chubb is here this year, and I think so. I think that makes a ton of sense. I'm not sure about Dylan Johnson just because I think he fills the same role as Donta Foreman does, and Foreman's kind of established where, you're taking a flyer on Johnson, who's actually a pretty good pass catcher and a good blocker. So there's reasons they could turn to Dylan Johnson, but I think they have that role already filled, so I really don't know that they'll go that way. Luke McCaffrey, I think, needs to get more run, needs to be talked about a little bit. And I know that people are like, well, he went to Rice. He's a wide receiver. He's Christian McCaffrey's younger brother. He's kind of an afterthought almost. But this dude went to Nebraska to be a college quarterback and then just casually was like, nope, I'm going to be one of the best slot receivers in college football. And he's a great route runner for a dude that's been a wide receiver for like 2 years, which is just insane. But he understands how to attack zone coverage, especially, and create separation. You see the quarterback in him when he's attacking zone coverage, man coverage, whatever it is. You see, oh, I know where the quarterback's going to go because this is cover 3. They've got somebody, a hangover, a deep safety, 2 highs, whatever it is. Luke McCaffrey does a great job with the high football IQ to understand this is where they're going to be. So this is where I need to be to get my quarterback, the best option. I think he goes day 3. So I don't think he goes tonight. But if you're sitting there in the 5th round, you haven't taken a wide receiver, I would love Luke McCaffrey to be the Browns slot receiver moving forward.
Jacob Roach from BrownsWire.com and the Barking Browns podcast. We're going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. Trade up candidates for the Browns, as well as favorite prospects for the Browns in the draft. That's coming up on Sports4CLE. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading, If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Jacob Roach from Browns Wire, as well as the Barking Browns podcast. So, Jacob, guys that are still on the board that you think are trade-up candidates, and I know we talked about Johnny Newton, defensive tackle from Illinois, Cooper DeJean, cornerback from Iowa. What do you like about those guys? How do you think they fit?
It's crazy I got Johnny Newton graded as a top 10 player in this entire class. And it's really crazy how sometimes I think players get overthought. Like, you overthink these situations. Like, I hear a lot of people say it was a down year for Johnny Newton, who had twice as many sacks this year as he did the year before. So I'm not really sure how the math ain't math in there in terms of being a down year for him. I just think he's a fantastic player on the interior, and he probably goes pretty quickly, kind of like we talked about with Keon Coleman, but he's just understands how to attack. He's explosive off the line of scrimmage. He's got violent hands. I think he's more of a good run block stuffer than people give him credit for, but that's not really, the biggest part of his game. But he matches the kind of athletic, explosive athletes that Jim Schwartz really covets in the middle there. Guys are kind of twitchy. He's got some bend in there, just does some rare physical has those rare physical gifts to really get after the passer and push the pocket vertically in the sense. And that's what Jim Schwartz absolutely loves. So if Newton you're going to have to trade up to get him. I would be just the biggest heist of the century if he fell to 54, which it just doesn't seem that's going to happen. But if he gets into the 40s and you're willing to hop up and get him, it's like you're set. You're set. You've got defensive tackles for the next 2-3 years. You've got Dalvin Tomlinson. Maybe Siaki Ika loses his roster spot in this situation, but adding Johnny Newton as a pass rusher with everything else they have on that defensive line would just be unfair. Would be absolutely unfair. And no wonder the AFC North is drafting a bunch of offensive linemen because of what they got cooking up north. It would be unfair. Now, Cooper DeJean, to me, is a chess piece. Jim Schwartz would love it, because then you have Grant Delpit and Cooper DeJean that could play high, single high safety, free safety, play in the box, play in the slot. Cooper DeJean can play outside corner. I think he's a corner at the next level. Some people want to pigeonhole him into being a safety, but I think he can do it all. And he's a fantastic returner, not just in situations where he returns kicks or punts, but when he gets the ball in his hands in an interception, if the ball is in Cooper DeJean's hands, interception, kick return, punt return, he finds the end zone. Like, his ball, you would think he's a wide receiver. As soon as he catches it, he's a wide receiver. He's moving in the open field. He's a great athlete. He was an all-state basketball player in college. If one of those guys get around pick 40 or something like that, I'm trading multiple assets to go up and get one of those guys, because they're both top 15 talents in this class.
Yeah, and DeJean was injured end of last year, so that might be one of the reasons that he's fallen a little bit as well. All right, I know you've addressed this and talked about it on the Barking Browns podcast. Favorite prospects for the Browns in the draft this year?
Well, number one for me is Jatavian Sanders, the tight end from Texas. And I know some people look at the athletic testing and say, hey, he's billed as a really great athlete, and that's why you should go get him. And then his athletic testing, when it came to the vertical jumps and things like that, was just okay. But when I go back to the tape, I don't see just okay athleticism. I see a really good athlete. And what he can do vertically in the seam from the tight end position, not many people can do that in this class. Now, he's kind of allergic to blocking, so I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It's not going to be David Njoku out there blocking. I won't lie to you guys. I won't do that. But David Njoku was allergic to blocking when he came into the NFL as well, and now you talk about him as one of the better blocking tight ends in football. So there's not much at the tight end position, but if you find even more ways to stretch the field vertically and open things underneath for guys like Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy, even David Njoku, I will never have an issue with taking athletes that can stretch the field vertically, and Jatavian Sanders can do that. So that really stands out to me. I was really big on Alex Wright a couple of years ago, like really big on Alex Wright. And if you wanted to kind of who's my favorite player in that round 3, round 4 range, it's North Carolina linebacker Cedric Gray. I really like the athlete that he is on tape as well. He's just real rangy. I get it. The last 3 years combined, he's missed like 47 tackles. But in that time frame, he's also had like 360 tackles. So, 3 straight years over 100. He's a guy that is instinctual, has a nose for the football. He finds the football. You're not in position to make 400 tackles in 3 years if you're not good at diagnosing what's happening and being able to get there. He's real rangy, sideline to sideline. I just think he could be the perfect cleanup player behind JOK. Like sometimes JOK, he makes the play not like bringing the guy down, but forcing him to bounce back inside when he doesn't want to. And Cedric Gray can be that athlete waiting inside to make those plays. So those two, and then, of course, Curran Amagaji, the tackle from Yale. I just think this dude's ceiling is through the roof. He's not ready to play at all, but guess what? The Browns do not need a tackle to play right now. And he could take Jed's spot if Jed doesn't work out, or you could knock him into guard, and he could be the future at left guard. But those three are the biggest, my favorite players for Cleveland in this class.
I like Corley. Corley, I think, gives them something that they don't have. And I think, I like Sanders. I like what I see with Sanders. Somebody pointed out he needs to work on his strength. I mean, we lock him in the weight room and we tell him we're not letting you out till you get done lifting weights, 6 hours a day. And then he can come out and he'll look like David Njoku. All right, before I let you go, Dane Brugler, mock draft rounds 2 and 3 with the Athletic today. So round 2, pick 54, Mason Smith, defensive tackle for the Browns. Teams are looking for players who are at least 6'5", 300-plus pounds on the defensive line. Those type are in short supply in this draft class. Smith is still a work in progress, has the traits and trajectory Cleveland covets. And then coming back in round 3, pick 85, Marshawn Lloyd, running back from USC. And when you look at it, what do you think of those two?
I'm really upset looking at that the two players I want went the 2 picks right in front of them at 52 and 53. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's where I'd want it. I'm not sure Mason Smith is even the best defensive tackle from LSU in this draft. I love what Dane does. I think he's fantastic at what he does, but I don't think that's the type of defensive tackle the Browns are looking for. I think they're more looking for the athletes to attack vertically. And I don't know that you would take a guy in Mason Smith in the 2nd round who is pretty much the same player you just took in the 3rd round last year. We know that Andrew Berry doesn't like to give up on draft picks. And as much as I didn't like the Siaki Ika pick, I like him more than Mason Smith, to be completely honest. Especially part of it is because he's already had a year with Jim Schwartz. He's already had a year getting stronger in the weight room in Cleveland. And so if it's me, I don't think they go defensive line unless it's someone like Michael Hall Jr. I'd take Michael Hall Jr. at 54 because then, again, give me all the pass rushers that you possibly can and find a way to just be good enough against the run. And Dalvin Tomlinson helps with that. And, so does Shelby Harris. So you got some guys that can do it. But if it was me, I don't think Mason Smith makes a ton of sense, but I love Marshawn Lloyd as a value pick in the 3rd round. You're talking about a guy that had barely over 100 carries. He had like 900 rushing yards. It's just like he was in an offense that was Caleb Williams driven, and which it absolutely should have been. He was the number 1 overall pick. But you're talking about an undersized guy, though, that has the motor and heart of a lion and just is explosive and a great pass catcher. Marshawn Lloyd, I think, could be a sneaky back that, say he's like the 5th running back off the board. 3 or 4 years from now, you're going to be like, why did any of he's the guy that you could be like, why did you pick X, Y, and Z ahead of Marshawn Lloyd? He's undersized, needs some development, but I think he's got the traits to be a 3-down quality starter in the NFL at running back.
Jacob Roach, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jacob.
Thanks, guys.
Jacob Roach, make sure you check him out, brownswire.com. He is also one of the hosts of the Barking Browns podcast. Always really good stuff. Check him out tonight. I'm sure they'll be doing plenty of Browns coverage. We're going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, Lance Reisland joins us. Film breakdown, video analysis of a mocked draft for all of the Browns picks tonight. That's straight ahead with Lance Reisland. Stay with us on Sports4CLE.
Play Maximum Millions and $2 million ultimate cash from the Ohio Lottery, and you may never look at scratch-offs the same way again.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Browns figure to be on the clock in a few hours now in the second round. Time for a film breakdown, video analysis, entire mock draft with the Browns picks. Whenever we do that, we welcome in Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Lance, I was giving you a little bit of grief. I knew who second round pick number 54 was going to be. You went with Peyton Wilson, linebacker, 6'4", 233 pounds from NC State.
Well, you know, it's funny. I've been standing on a mountain with Peyton Wilson for a couple weeks now by myself. But I tell you what, I try to keep it based on what I see on film. And obviously some of those first-round guys are just fantastic. But when it comes to linebacker, when it comes to second-round play, there's no one better than Peyton Wilson. You know, 138 tackles, but more it's his explosiveness. So you're going to see him on this play, comes on a blitz from the outside, and then he just runs the quarterback down. He's absolutely relentless. He can play multiple positions. He can blitz from multiple positions. He can cover multiple people. He's 6'4". He's 233 pounds. Now, everybody, you know, when I do things with people who are really, really good at the draft, which I'm not. I like to film. I like to watch film. And I understand he's going to be 24 years old, and I understand he's had some knee injuries. But you're talking about a guy who's at elite speed. The production matches what you saw at the combine. He's an absolute weapon at linebacker. The idea of him and having him and JOK inside, allowing JOK to be more free in space, because this is a big guy too. He's 230-plus pounds. So stuck to my guns. Again, I was very alone in this pick, but I stuck with it because he is by far my favorite film breakdown of the year. Just a talented guy, explosive, nasty, plays angry, very, very easy choice for me.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, tested well at the combine, 4.43 speed, 34.5 vertical, 119-inch broad jump. All right, round three, number 85. You went with Malachi Corley. I've seen some people that think he's going to be there in the third round. So take us through what you like with Corley.
Well, two receivers came down for me was Xavier Legette and Corley. Now, Corley's a run-after-catch guy. He's really thick, so you can see him here. He gets hit late in the route here. Great contact balance. He's probably the best in the draft yards after catch, including the top guys. He's 5'11", he's 215, so he's going to give you some of that stuff you wanted with Elijah Moore, but he's at 215 pounds. Really, really explosive guy. Really, really good speed, but he's quicker than he is fast at times. Really good in the short area. Again, really hard to tackle. Again, him and Xavier Legette are two of the guys I really, really liked. I'm not sure Xavier Legette will be around. Corley might not be around as well, but you know, there's so many good receivers in this draft. I think some of them are going to slide because some people don't have receiver needs. So again, I really, really like Corley. He's much higher on my board in terms of even the top guys because of the ability to get easy yards. And you and I have talked about a year now about the Browns being able to get you easy yards. This is a guy to get you not only home runs, but get you to second 8, which the Browns need.
All right, round 5. So Browns don't have a pick in round 4. Round 5, pick 156. You go with a tight end, Jared Wiley, 6'6", 253 pounds from TCU. What do you like with Wiley?
Well, Wiley's actually my number 1 tight end. So he's a guy who's very position flexible. He's 6'6", he's 240, 250. Big physical kid, really good athlete, really good ball skills, spatial awareness, can block just enough. But in the Browns offense, you talk about pin and pull. He doesn't have to be a killer. Those guys inside have to be the maulers. He has to be a good athlete, a good position blocker, and then he has to be really good in the pass game, which he is. A lot of people like Sanders out of Texas. I also really like Theo Johnson out of Penn State. I think those guys are really good tight ends as well. This guy is going to be later. I think he'll be picked after those two, but he's my favorite tight end for what the Browns scheme is, how they would use him, his length, his ability to be a matchup nightmare in the red zone. 12 personnel with Njoku, with him on the opposite side. They can run the ball if it's nickel. They can pass the ball if they get regular personnel. I love this guy. I think he's a steal. Again, my favorite tight end on the board. Sanders is good too. Johnson, there's some other guys. This is my guy right here at 156.
All right, so moving on to the 6th round, it would be pick 206. You go with an offensive lineman, Nathan Thomas, 6'4", 331 pounds, from Louisiana.
So once I get to 5th, 6th, or 7th round, you're talking about guys with great upside, great ceilings. So you're talking about a guy who's got really, really good ability to move his feet. He's light on his feet. So my former O-line coach used to say he's a dancing bear, right? So he has really, really light feet in his pass drops. He's about as good as I've seen in space on screens. He's really nasty in the run game. He can play both guard and tackle. Here he is at guard, moving his feet. Just a really athletic kid. And I think when you talk about guys who, especially inside at the offense and defensive lineman, they have to be able to move their feet, and they have to be able to have a really high ceiling. So this is a guy played left tackle, played left guard. I'm sorry, you say at the left tackle here. Just a really, really good athlete that I think can play multiple positions for the Browns. Really nasty in the run game, light on his feet and pass protection, and great in screens. All the things that the Browns like.
All right, so they get the lineman that you have as a succession plan, if you will, for moving forward. You know, the interior offensive line getting a little bit up there in age. Coming back in round 7, pick 227, you go defensive tackle and Gabe Hall. So that flexibility, 6'5", 291 pounds out of Baylor. What do you like with Hall?
So Hall's another really raw athlete. So you can see him here. He's at number 95. He's going to extend this offensive line. He's a really strong guy. He's right there on the line of scrimmage, makes that play. What Hall gives you is a guy who kind of Siaki Ika, the guy who can be, he doesn't have to play right away. He can learn the game. And I've always felt being at all positions, but especially offensive, defensive line, you need some years to grow into your man body, right? So it's just like when you go to college and you're an 18-year-old freshman playing against 23-year-old men. You know, these guys need to grow a little bit. If they're not going to be first-round guys who can be immediate impact guys, they need to have guys who have traits. Andrew Zaberry is a guy who likes traits. This guy's 6'5", 6'6". He's 290 to 300 pounds. He extends very well. He runs very well. He's a really raw athlete with great short area quickness. He can run straight ahead. He can change direction. He plays with violent hands. He does all those things you want, but you can't teach his size and his speed. And if you're going to take a flyer in the 6th, 7th round, this is the type of body type you do it with. Big guys who can move, that hopefully you can mold into what they want. Again, he doesn't have to play early. He could be a practice squad guy for a while, but a guy with great potential and a really high ceiling.
All right, so some flexibility there as well, as he can play tackle, he can play end. All right, you wrap up this one, 7th round, pick 243. You go running back, Carson Steele from UCLA, 6 foot, 228 pounds. What do you like about Steele?
Well, he's a very violent runner. He's got good forward lean. He's got really good contact balance. He's not a home run hitter by any means. He's a chunk guy. But the NFL, with the speed in the NFL, you need chunk guys. So this is a guy in the Browns offense that can get him to 2nd and 4. Probably won't break a lot of runs. I'm not sure he would be an every down back, but he has the potential to, because he can catch the ball very well. But you're talking, he's a MAC guy. I love my MAC guys. He was at Ball State in 2022, rushed for 1,500 yards. Then he goes out to UCLA, moves up, a little bit in talent-wise, and still has a very successful year, almost 900 yards. A very aggressive runner, and I think it's something the Browns, again, for me, it's not really who they take, but it's the fact that they can take who they value. Those scouting guys, Andrew Berry and his staff, they do a great job of trying what they value. And that's what you like. So just with my mock draft, with everybody's mock draft, they're taking who they like. And they don't have to take because they need something. If there's one position I think they need a tight end with production. And I think Wiley would give, but Steele here, hard runner, physical runner, would be a good first and second down back. And then eventually moving to that 3-down back if it's something they want. But really like him, and I think he's a guy who will have a successful NFL career.
Yeah, you mentioned, played last year under UCLA, so he was under Chip Kelly as well. So that will be interesting to see. I'm sure he got a little bit of some coaching that would be NFL-wise. I'm guessing of all of them, you like your linebacker off the top as a guy that you think could come in and surprise some people.
Well, the thing is, there's two guys I really think well, three guys, but two guys in particular. One guy would be Wilson, obviously, and I don't know what it has been, but I've broken down almost every snap in the last few years, and he is an absolute destroyer. And when I think about when I was calling plays, when you watch film, there's sometimes you watch a film and go, man, how are we going to deal with this guy? And that was Peyton Wilson for me. He was a guy that just ruined offenses week in and week out with his ability to do so many things. Then the other guy I like that I think is very underrated is Jared Wiley. I think Corley is going to be a really good pro and get the Browns what they need. But in terms of tight end with great production, pass game, can block a little bit, will learn, can put his hand on the ground occasionally, can play that fullback spot with some position flexibility. I think Jared Wiley is a guy who's going to have a really, really successful career too. He's not a killer in the run game, but that's no longer what tight ends do in the NFL for the most part. Tight ends in the NFL are glorified big slots. And I think Jared Wiley can be a really productive guy and would be awesome opposite David Njoku if that was the case.
Lance Reisland, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Lance.
As always, thanks for having me.
Lance Reisland with a video breakdown, film analysis of a mock draft. We will have Lance back next week. He will talk a little bit about the guys that the Browns drafted and how they fit in with what the Browns are doing. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here Monday at 4 o'clock. We'll break down who the newest Browns are. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you Monday at 4 on Sports for CLE.